Good morning, Hemshech, Ayin Beis. We concluded, but we're reconstructing its context to be able to understand where the Rebbe Rashab would have continued based on the Maimarim. That is the basis, the foundational text of Ayin Beis, and that is, namely, we're coming to the conclusion of the Biur on the Maimar Mika Hashem Elokeinu HaMagbiel L'Sheves in Torah Ohr Miketz. We're up to 40b, where we discussed Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, the role of the soul in the context of the three elements of a candle, the wick, the oil that can transform into the Eish Hashem, the fire of God, the light, the love of God, and then their mitzvah, how a mitzvah contributes to that, even on a higher level, elevating the animal soul, which is the shemen, and the physical world to the levels of makifim, higher levels, all the way to Torah Ohr, Malchus of Ein Sof, as we've learned. So, in the last part of the Maimer, he's been discussing how this is all indicated in the verse Hamagbiel L'Sheves, and the second half of the verse Hamashpili Li'rois. So we learned the first part, Hamagbiel L'Sheves. Magbihi is elevation, Magbia, with a yud at the end, representing what a mitzvah accomplishes is by adding the yud into the dalet of Malchus, which is dalus, the less law megama klum on its own. So we add the yud, makes it into a hey, and then it elevates it all the way to the yud above, which we learned as chachma, all the way to Malchus of Ein Sof. And that is L'Sheves is the process, because the purpose of it is two explanations he gave. One is the purpose of this aliyah is to bring it down into existence, in the words of the Maimer that we learned in the last class. L'Sheves, after the brackets, L'Sheves aliyah zushal Malchus is kedei lahamshech erachayis b'bchinas yeshiva vayeshev Hashem, that it should settle in and be integrated into existence. Ki yeshiva Malchus are kol achas, kol b'chinas achas, right? Yeshiva bring it down. You read the Vashpal b'chinas acharai. Okay. Since we're really summing up, I did look up the context. He said, "Kein tefillah shel yad shu malchus himiyushav." So we were wondering what that means exactly. So indeed, it's referring to tefillah shel yad. So in Pri Etz Chaim and Shara Krishma, and it's quoted in different places in Chassidus. Namely, I'll refer to one place, Imre Bina, from the Mittler Rebbe, Shar HaTfilin, Perek Mem Aleph, chapter 41. She explains there that there's two parts in davening. The part that we say from Birchas Yetzer, from Birchas Yetzer or Birchas Beirach Cheshach, Yetzer, right? Through Shema is called Tefillah Miyushav. The time when you could sit during that davening, and people sit. And that relates to, says the Pri Etz Chaim, to Tefillah Shel Yad. So we say Tefillah Shel Yad, he means that the part of the Tefillah is called Tefillah Miyushav, that's what the Tefillah Shel Yad relates to, and there is indeed a custom for some to sit when they put on Tefillah Shel Yad, but I don't think he's referring to that, because I didn't see that cited there. Then comes the next part of davening, the Shemoneh Esrei. From after Shema and through Shemoneh Esrei, that's called Tefillah Mi'umad. That's the part of davening when we stand, and that corresponds to Tefillah Shel Rosh. So even though he says Tefillah Shel Yad, but he means that part of Tefillah that's Miyushav, that's connected to Tefillah Shel Yad. Shu B'Malchus Hu Miyushav. And the Yud in the Ritzua, the Yud in the Tefillah Shel Yad, which is the Ritzua, the strap, when the box, as it fits near the bicep, there's always that knot. That knot is in the Tzura of a Yud. He says, Zehu Inyan Yud Hanal, the Yud of Magbihi, the Yud of the mitzvah that elevates it, that gets elevated all the way to the higher levels. So you have here both aspects, the elevation, but also the Miyushav, the Yishuv, which is L'Sheves, Magbihi L'Sheves. But Oideh Shleimer, another explanation he gave for L'Sheves is the explanation based on the Medrash that it's a state of security, a state of being established and secure. When you're sitting, the Melech is called Augustus. He's won the battles. So now he can sit so-called peacefully, been established and so on. When the Melech is still in the state of standing, it's more Hashem Ish Milchama. Is when Hashem is more in a state of war, where he's still battling the enemies. So essentially, the Miyushav represents a full process of being established. Augustus Yeshiv. And who's Augustus? That's referring to Melech Hamlachim. When Malchus receives a Malchus of Ein Sof in a form that, in the form of a Yeshiv, Augustus Yeshiv, that is the meaning of Lashevis. So that's an additional element that's now also not just that it's coming down, but it's also being established down in a very permanent fashion. That's my dafkel. So through the aliyah it comes down. Now these two interpretations are not opposite interpretations. They fit. They obviously work with each other, but it's just an additional point that he's bringing the union of the yeshiva here, and it should not be raglei yerdis. So the raglei no longer are involved in things that are opposite of life, which is battle and war. It's a state of yeshiva because the legs are lifted up, as we read here, as we learned here. Okay. Now comes the end of the Maimer, where we're going to Hamashpili Li'rois. Now that you mentioned Magbi Lashevis, which is the kavanah of mitzvahs, which essentially is an aliyah momata l'mayla, even though it also includes Hamshacha. Because number one, you have to have Hamshacha in order to have the aliyah. And number two, after the aliyah, you have to bring it back down, as we learned. So now he goes, and we're continuing reading inside the line that begins Oz Yashir, around halfway down on Mem Beis, which is 40 column B, 40 the second column. So he says like this now.
But before you do, could I just ask a question about what you just said about davening? Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, no, because first you use the sitting part as like a preliminary part, and then you use the sitting part as an ending part after you conquer the world. So it seems like there's two different types of sitting.
What do you mean by preliminary? I'm not sure what you mean by
preliminary. In the beginning of davening, before Kriyat Shema, you're sitting, and then finally, and then afterwards you stand, and then in the second way of doing it, after the world, then you said. I thought that's what you said. Sorry.
No. He said that the aliyah has to be in order to bring the hamshacha into yeshiva. That's what he said. Okay, it shouldn't just go up. It's kedei lahamshir, the Ohr v'chaya should come down into malchus in a state of yeshiva. That's what he said. In explaining what yeshiva is, the yeshiva is connected to malchus. He brought a few examples. He brought that the Beis David, Malchus Beis David, sat in the Azara. He brought the second thing that a Isha, it says by Isha Karet Meshav, which by the way is a Gemara in Pesachim, right in the beginning. It talks about, in Lashon Nikiya, talks there about riding on a horse, where somebody's metama, a saddle of a horse. So by a woman, he uses the word seat, because a woman riding on a horse in a discreet and modest way. So he uses the word Meshav and Yeshiva. And then he brought V'chein Tfilah Shel Yad Shel Malchus. It's only to bring out the concept of that Tfilah Shel Yad is Miyushiv, is the level of Malchus. That's all he's coming to say. He's not discussing here that first you sit and then you stand. That's not being discussed here. I brought that to explain the difference between Tfilah Shel Yad and Tfilah Shel Rosh. Here, the main thing here is that the aliyah is kedei, there should be a lashevis. In other words, it's not just a magbiyah to elevate everything, but you want malchus of Ein Sof to be brought back into malchus down below. That's what he says here. And the yud sheberitzu of tefillin shayad is that yud that is the aliyah that the mitzvah reaches up and then draws it down. So he's not going into here the process of first sitting and then standing, or then. As a matter of fact, standing here, he's not considering it to be an advantage. He says the standing is, in the second interpretation, standing is not as high as sitting. So there's another discussion, but that's
okay. So now I understand that they use it completely differently. Thank you.
Yeah, it's another discussion. What is the meaning of Tefillah Miyushav, if you look in Imre Bina, chapter 41, Sharat Tefillin, he discusses these two stages of Shema to Shemoneh Esrei. But that's not what he's discussing here. Maybe the Shema, we did talk about, is the Hizbanus of the Nefesh Alakis that brings to the Nefesh Habamis, but I don't want to go there yet. Maybe in the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer may be more relevant. Okay, any other questions? Okay.
He's saying that the psilo, the yud, is the hamshacha milmaylo. That's a mitzvah. Hayud shebesoch hahem asher nimshach lo ha'or me'oyer ein sof. This is the yud.
He said the yud was also the aliyah earlier, so he said both. But correct. And in the context here, yes, correct. It's the hamshacha, like he said on the top of the page. Because if you look, he says, "Magbi shaliyas hamalchus b'malchus then said gam ken al yidei yud shebetecha hey shehu mashanim shech lo ha'orem ha'erin sof u'kumavur le'il shekol aliyu al yidei hamshach utchila momayla." V'hine b'chinas yud zeh shebetecha hey shanim shech adem is zeh b'chinas psila hanim shech l'techa ner. That's what you're referring to, right?
Yeah.
So there he's talking both ways. So he's talking both, both directions. You look at the previous column, you'll see, it says through the Yud comes the Aliyah to Malchus of Ein Sof. That's Magbish, Ali Samad Malchus. But now he says also the Gamken, yeah. Okay. So continuing on, the line Oz Yosha, the pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. So he says, V'achakach, after it says Hamagbi L'Sheves, that we just discussed, and afterwards he says Hamashpili Li'rois. What is that referring to? Hamashpili means hashpola, to come down. Li'rois, to see. So Magbi L'Sheves means to elevate and bring that elevation back down. Hamashpili Li'rois is coming down to see. So it's a pure hamshachim u'may lamato. So he says Zeu b'chinas v'teira eir. That's the second half of the pasuk. Ner mitzvah v'teira eir. Well, he said the same thing at the end of the Maimer, the original Maimer on page 39a on top. So it's Hamashpili Li'rois. V'hu hamshachas ein sof b'malchus the ein sof. This is now we're talking about the hamshach of ein sof, b'malchus of ein sof. But now it's completely the way it is intact from above. That's what the hisofa that Ner Mitzvah doesn't have. Ner Mitzvah, at the end of the day, it's a Ner. It's a more limited level. So it does elevate to Malchus of Ein Sof and then brings it back in L'Sheves. But here it's a Chatchila coming, Teireh, the way it is coming from above. Like he said, the Moilach Rusha Lamayla Kain Hu Lamata. So from Malchus of Ein Sof, where does it come down to? Li'rois. B'shamayim, which is Torah Shebiksav. Heaven is referring to Li'rois B'shamayim is the written Torah. Uba'oretz is Torah Shebal Peh, is the oral Torah. The Kamoi, the Oretz, the Kabbalas Mishamayim. Just like earth receives from heaven, Kamoi Shekosav L'motar HaShamayim Tishtemayim, from the water, from the rain of heaven, Tishtemayim, it will irrigate, will be able to drink water. You'll draw water from where? From Motar HaShamayim, from the waters of heaven, from the rain of heaven. So the same thing, Kach Torah Shebal Peh, which is Oretz Mekabelas M'Torah Shebiksav, receives from Torah Shebiksav Shamayim, Kadam Rinon, like we say in the Gemara many times, Minoha Nemila, the Amar Kra. So Chazal, the Gemara will say something, and then it'll say Minoha Nemila. How do you know this? How do you know this thing? And it says the Amar Kra. That means that the lesson in Torah Shabbat Peh is drawing and is based on Amar Kra, the Pasuk in Torah Shabbat Ksav. So explaining here, which he did not explain in the original Maimer, why Torah Shabbat Ksav, Torah Shabbat Peh, their relationship. Now he's saying because Torah Shabbat Peh receives from Torah Shabbat Ksav like earth receives from heaven the rain. The bottom line is that now the Hamshacha Mamaylo Lamata, and what is the Hamshacha Mashpili Li'rois? The Li'rois b'shamayim b'baretz. The diuk here is the word Li'rois, to see, with the visual. Hainu Li'rois Seina Lemer Shugili Ein Sof Mamish. That's referring to a mamish. When you see something, it means you're completely experiencing it with your own sight. So this is mamish referring to a total gilui of Ein Sof b'shamayim b'baretz. Shehein Torah Shabbat and Torah Shabbat Peh. That Torah Shabbat, Torah Shabbat Peh, we have a full gilui of Ein Sof. It's not limited. When you have, let's say, the kav, the psila, the wick, as we learned, it's a limited flow. The yud, it's a narrow flow. It's a wick. But when you're talking Torah Ohr, you have the gili mamish, gili Hashem mamish, where it says gili alakus Ein Sof mamish, shein Torah Shabbat. The Dvar Hashem Lamaila, which means the Torah is Mamish Dvar Hashem Lamaila. When the Eibishter said Torah, both Torah Shebiksav, Torah Shabbat Peh, this is Dvar Hashem. It's the words of God coming down into Torah. So Torah is like a non-nafshik shavizyav. You have in Torah Dvar Hashem Mamish. And this is now going to explain is higher than the Gili that comes from the Avos Hashem, from the Neshama of Ner Hashem Yishmasadam. Like he said at the end of the last Maimer also, there it's Shema Yisrael. Now he's going to say this Li'rois, because Li'rois is a Riyah, meaning that you have the Hamshacha above, what you have below is exactly as it is above. In other words, the Torah that we have below is a expression of divine revelation. That's the whole Chiddush of Torah. So it's Li'rois. L'mayla megili b'chinas Eid Ava, Menefesh Alikis, which is higher than the Gili Ohr, Ha'ava, the revelation of love that the Nefesh Alikis has on its own, like we learned earlier. It's higher than that. Shenikar Gamkin Ohr Canal, which is also called Ohr. Remember, he said, why was it called Ohr? He called it Ohr Chayzer. He said, because it's an Ohr that generates. That's also called Ohr. He said it's an Ohr like Eish, that even though it's limited, it creates an infinite, it creates like Ein Sof, one candle lights another candle. So it's also called Ohr. But Torah Ohr is higher than Ner Hashem Nishmasadam. However, even though it's called Ohr, so Ach Shehu Nimshach B'Bchinas Shmiyah. It's nimshach in a level of shmiyah and only contemplation. It's not riyah. When you see something, you see mamash the thing. When you hear about it, it's still not as close to you and as vivid as when you see something. Even b'chol meidecha that we learned before, it's still part of Ava that's connected to Shmiyah, to Shema Yisrael. But Torah Ohr is a higher level. Zehu b'chinas Hamashpili Li'rois. That's the level of Hamashpili Li'rois. Li'rois. Pirush Li'rois b'chinas Riyah v'gili mamish. That it comes in a state of Riyah, revelation, and absolute and total revelation. Ayin ba'ayin yiro. Eye to eye, we will see. When the Asidlavi, there will no longer be any lo yikona feid merechi, ayin ba'ayin, eye to eye. It will be like literally face to face, eye to eye. Whereas in the Ava, the Ohr Ava of the Neshama, you reach a level of Shmiyah, Shema Yisrael. It's not quite Riyah, which is very consistent to what we learned in Ayin Beis. I'm going to elaborate on that shortly, about Riyah, the different levels in Riyah. And ultimately, the goal is that we should see the divine even down below. But initially, the neshama can get to Shema Yisrael, that leads it to Achdus, that brings Avos Hashem, which is an Ohr. And then after that comes the mitzvah, Ner mitzvah, that elevates it even higher. And ultimately, the Torah is a level of Riyah Mamish, Ayin B'Ayin Yiro, that Torah leads to. And as we said earlier, he says it here very briefly, but it's the three levels of Ner Hashem Nishmasadim, Ner mitzvah, and V'Torah. I'm going to elaborate more, but I want to stop here. If anybody wants to ask immediate question on this, then I'll contextualize this into the whole context of Torah as well as Ayin Beis. Because with this, he concludes the Maimer, the Alter Rebbe. This is the end of the Maimer, the beard of Mika Hashem Elokeinu, Hamashpili Li'rois, Hamashpili Li'rois. Any questions on what we just learned?
Is there mitzvah not re'iyah?
No. It says only by Hamashpili Li'rois on Torah Ohr. Ner mitzvah is a psila. A psila wick is not quite like Torah Ohr, like the flame itself, the fire itself. If you go back to the previous Maimer, he made it clear, Torah Ohr is the gilim el maila kamoy lamata. Lamata kamoy lamaila. You don't say that on the mitzvah. That was on page 38D. He explained that relatively in detail. Yeah.
The said that the Ner mitzvah is mashenimshach lo ha'or me'oyer ein sof, higher than a Shema.
Well, why don't you go back? I just referred you. Read Lamed Ches, Gimel, and Dalet. Bottom of Gimel and Dalet. He explains the difference between Ner mitzvah and Torah Ohr there. Firstly, he says mitzvah is mamata lamayla and Torah is mamay lamata. That's number one. Secondly, mamay lamata means that the Ohr exactly. I mean, it's a pashta thing. A mitzvah is a limited experience. You put on tefillin, you're taking gashmizdik film, you're mamshich ratzon elyon, but it's all in gvul. Torah is bli gvul. Aruchem eretz midah. He made it clear. Torah. That's why Torah is aruchem eretz midah rechava min yam. Megala amukes. He made it very clear. If you go back to the Maimer, he talks about this. I mean, it's not my explanation. He says at the bottom of Lamed Ches Gimel and top and Dalet. The whole idea of Torah. That's where he brought the whole idea of Torah is higher than Tefillah with Rabbi Yehuda, who was Terase Menose. It was all that Dvar Hashem Mamish. When it comes to Torah, the person who's speaking Torah is speaking, like he said, Dvar Hashem. What was the lashon he used? He used the lashon mamish like a melech, melech. Dvar Hashem mamish beficha. Samti dvari beficha, like he said here. So Torah is higher than mitzvahs in this context, But the mitzvah is the Torah is nechaz b'ha mitzvah. If you look there, because the mitzvah is you say ikra v'seidasin is b'mitzvahs. The Torah is ikra v'seidasin b'mitzvahs. Shalzer nemar, So the mitzvahs are the channel, like the wick, that creates the fire or the light. And the light is, however, higher than the mitzvah. And you have all three elements here. Bottom line is this. Let me now, let me elaborate a bit more. I'm going back now to Ayin Beis, but also through the eyes of Torah Ohr. So we have here is three levels. We have Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, a neshama compared to a candle. We have Ner Mitzvah, a mitzvah compared to a candle. And we have Torah Ohr is Ohr itself. Okay. So the Alter Rebbe explained, and the Rebbe Rashab actually in pages 1350 through 1352 more or less summed this up as well, with more oisius, with more words, and said basically like this. So Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam is what the Nefesh Elikis on its own, without its tool chest of mitzvahs and Torah, what could it achieve? It's a divine soul. It's a wick that enters into the body and the animal soul, into the shemen, and it has the power through contemplation of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, and Baruch Shem, to educate and inform and ultimately harness the animal soul to some extent to reach V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha, Chol Vavcha, V'shnei Yitzorecha. Not only that, it could also come to b'chol moedecha. He even spoke about when a person goes further than beyond his limitations, he becomes to, like he said, the deeper level of ava b'chol moedecha. That he explained on page 40. What I just said, I summed up, is from page 39. I'm sorry, 38C. Yeah, 38C primarily. Then on page 39C, he spoke about the nefesh habamis, which is the shemen, that there's two levels. There's the nefesh habamis adds something that the nefesh halikis doesn't have on its own. The psila is still only a psila, a wick. The oil turns it into a more powerful flame, b'chol moedecha, bligvul. Like explained, not real bligvul mamish, because a human being can only have that much, but it's beyond your parameters, so that leads to be mamshich ma'id lamaila, bligvul from above. What he called Eid Ein Sof, he even called it the Torah Ohr, actually. But it's still coming through your Avodah. If you go to 39, when you go to 39D, before he went to mitzvahs, he actually said, L'chein nikra nefesh l'kipsila, Shem debiru nefesh habamis, and then he said, L'chein nikra ava rabba erchezer, el shayzei nimshach achikach milmayla lamata, Eid Ein Sof mamash b'chinas v'Torah Ohr. I stopped at that line because it means that you have primed the animal soul to now love, and it's a keli to receive even the Torah Ohr. Now you still need Torah to be mamshechit, but it means this is what a neshama can achieve on its own. Then comes step 2, what a neshama achieves with a mitzvah. That's what he says. Ach ein neshama b'lei mitzvah. A neshama is not a neshama without a mitzvah. So the mitzvah, and on the other hand, a mitzvah or Torah without a neshama is also not complete. So you need both. Tzarich gam shneim. And then he goes on. What does the mitzvah do? The mitzvah is ratzona elyon. What we spoke about right now is the neshama's aveda. Even though you could say Shema Yisrael is also ratzona elyon, it's also a mitzvah, but clearly it's not all the mitzvahs that he's bringing. It's not like talis and tefillin that you bring that's more than just tefillah. This is a mitzvah that comes through davening, which is primarily mamat l'mayla of the neshama. A mitzvah introduces a new thing. God's 613 mitzvahs. And he calls that makif, a makif elyon, an air that is higher than what you achieve on your own. And the neshama using a mitzvah, that now draws down the makifim, and from the level of levushim and makifim, that elevates like a slingshot. The stone can only go that far. The Avos Hashem that a neshama generates on its own can only go that far, even with b'chol moedecha of the animal soul. But a mitzvah takes it to another level altogether. That's what he said here. That's what he explained. Yeah, and it's mamshechit in into the physical world. And the mitzvah therefore catapults and propels a person to a completely different level, higher than the neshama on its own. And it makes sense. I gave a whole explanation on this in previous classes. It's how much you can run on your own and how much you can do when you have an additional instrument and additional tools. That's why we have mitzvahs. But we still have not reached the ultimate. Because even though a mitzvah is mamshech the makif, and we said it's the yud of Hamashpili Li'rois, Hamashpili Li'rois, and it goes all the way to Malchus of Ein Sof, but you're still through a limited mitzvah. You don't have Eid Ein Sof, mamish, the way it is, purely from God's perspective. So a mitzvah has relevated us to a higher level, and it's higher than the neshama on its own below, but it's still lacking that the Torah Ohr. Torah Ohr is Eid Ein Sof mamish, higher than the tzimtzum, not through the kav. A mitzvah is still the kav, a psila. A neshama is also a psila, but a mitzvah is even higher, because a mitzvah goes all the way up to the makif. And Torah brings us mamshachim amayla lamata. Once you have the hoya dvarim e'ela ashanech mitzavcha, which follows vahafta, then you come to you have the Torah Ohr And Eir is now Eir as it is above. That's how it comes down below. Eir Ein Sof Mamish, and it's in the form of Riyah. Whereas the Neshama only came to a level of Shmiyah.
What about the mitzvah?
Let me finish. And Torah is a level of Eir Riyah. He doesn't say where the mitzvah is. The mitzvah is in between somewhere. Fine. He doesn't say. He says clearly, Hamashpili Li'rois is Torah. That's not mitzvah. Mitzvah is Hamagbil L'Sheves. A mitzvah is an aliyah to a higher place. It's mamshechir in Gashmis ha'elam. So you have it in Tachtenim. And then comes the highest level is Torah Zriyah. So if you remember, after page 1352, the Rebbe Rashab said, V'nirali levaya, this inyan of Hamagbil, this whole inyan that we just learned, that we just discussed, with the inyan of Riyah. And then he goes into a whole discussion of Erariyah, vision, eyesight, Er HaLavana, the moon, the Er of a Evan Tev, of a luminous stone. It's all Er HaMakabel of Malchus. And then he explains that in Riyah there's two levels. There's the way we see the eye, the physical eye. The Riyah is limited. We need a light. We need an outside light because we can't see in the dark. And then there's Etzem Koyach HaRiyah, the way the Neshama is above. That will be La'asad Lavi. Then the Neshama will arrive to the level of Riyah. But right now, the Neshama needs support, siyua. If you remember the Malachim, Einei Hashem, you need the Einei Ha'eda, the leaders, and you need Torah Ohr to illuminate the Neshama below, because the Neshama below, Torah is higher than the Neshama. Without Torah, we can't, the paths of life are not illuminated. So Torah illuminates us, we elevate. As we elevate and become more refined, ultimately we will be able to come to Einenu Me'ires Kishemesh Yereach Ukiyereach. That will be the level, and even higher than that, all the way to the Etzem Koyach HaRiyah. But right now the Seder is Neshama, Mitzvah, Torah, Ohr. That's what he says here. So the Neshama also leads to a certain level of Ohr, the Ohr Hashem, Avis Hashem, but it's still limited, still in the form of Shmiyah, and still limited. So, but what you basically have is like this: the neshama itself through tefillah is mamata lamayla mamish. Torah is mamayla lamata mamish, and mitzvahs is a combination of both. It's mamata lamayla in the sense that it goes into gashmi sa'elam and it's a psila, it's a wick, but it's mamayla lamata because it brings down from the yud all the way from malchus of Ein Sof, from the makifim al yenim, it brings it down into this world, l'sheves. So you have here Mamata Lamayla, Mamayla Lamata, and something that's somewhat in between. So in the language of Ayin Beis, Tefillah was the 550 pages he spoke about till page 1350. 1350 began with Torah Mamayla Lamata, but he brought mitzvahs in the middle. So mitzvahs is the Mamata Lamayla and the Mamayla Lamata combined. Because on one hand, the mitzvah is given to us through Torah, and Torah is nechaz through a mitzvah. That's how we perform Torah, through mitzvahs. On the other hand, a mitzvah is still something that is a mitzvah for the slavish and gashmis, and Torah is not. Torah remains above gashmis. Torah remains Torah Ohr, that God is giving us His Gilui of the course as it is above. That's how it comes down below, as he explained, and this is key. He explained it on top of page 38D. Yeah, but he said Ani Rishon v'Ani Achrin. That's Torah. L'mata mamash habitl. So there's the highest level of bittul. So one second. Let me finish here. So what we have here, what we've learned from Torah Ohr is a few things that tie up the knots. It explains to us how the Nefesh Habamis is transformed. The question that the Rebbe Rashab asked on page 1466. It also teaches us what Ner Mitzvah is. Also a question that he asked on 1466. Let me make sure I'm saying the right page. I think so. Let's see. Yeah, 1466. So the questions he asked on 1466 he never answered are answered in Torah Ohr. Question number one: how you affect this into how you affect this in the Nefesh Habamis? When the Nefesh Habamis initially is antithetical to the divine, and what Ner Mitzvah is. Does he explain why is Dafke B'keich HaNeshama? Well, yes, he also explains why is B'keich HaNeshama, because the Neshama is a Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, Nefesh Alekis, and it through its is bonus in Yichudei Tata and Yichudei Law, and the Yichud of both Yichudim, it teaches the Nefesh Habamis. But the Alter Rebbe didn't explain it in detail. The Mittler Rebbe is going to explain a lot more how these bonus of Shema leads to the transformation and the taming and transformation and harnessing of the animal soul. The Rebbe Rashab, the Alter Rebbe said something about it. He said it affects it, and in the beard he explained more detail how it affects it with the psila and the kav. But in the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, I believe he's going to, and also the B'chol Meidecha, that comes out of it. But in the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, I think that's going to be explained even more so. So what we've gained is a lot here. We have now the picture that the Rebbe Rashab never got back to, but based on what he began on page 1350, and then 1466, the questions, and where he left off at the end, 14, which is the end of the Hemshech, which is 1477, we now, based on the Torah Ohr, can have a broader picture here. But I'll be happy to answer more questions if people want more explanation on all of this.
The beginning must be the Ohr HaNeshama. If you don't have that, you cannot reach the mitzvah because you don't want to do the mitzvah. So the Ohr HaNeshama is, the Alter Rebbe said before, that even if you have mitzvah, you have Torah, but the beginning must be Aliyas HaNeshama. Maybe this is also answering the question that you said now.
I'll read the Alter Rebbe's words. Tzarech lahagdim hizbonu shel nefesh lekis, hi ner Hashem nishmas adam kedei liyes v'hafta b'chol avavcha ki ruach eiseh ruach. So close to the bottom of 38d, he says clearly, after Nermit, he says that you have to have the Akdama of the Neshama, because it brings im yasim alav libei acha teire chachma shebenefesh akiz v'chinish Hashemen acha tia chachma shebenefesh achiyunis, because it's simple as this: the animal soul on its own is busy with its own interests. Someone has to educate it. You cannot get an animal soul to learn Torah or do mitzvahs properly if it's not educated. The Nefesh Elikis in Shema and Voyim Shemaya and Baruch Shem, rather, he explains is how that is educating the animal soul to be a keli, to become shemen for the neshama, for Eir Hashem, Avos Hashem, which in turn makes it a keli to become Chachma Elikus, from Chachma Seichel Anushi. That he says explicitly at the bottom of 38d. And all of bottom line is everything is in these Maimorim here. We don't need to speculate because everything is said here. Look, let me just say this. I am speaking here after learning these two Maimorim thoroughly. So the questions that you're asking, if it says it explicitly in the Maimer, I'll just point out where it says it. We don't need to guess. If it's in a question that you have that's beyond these Maimorim, that are not stated explicitly, or how it connects to Ayin Beis, that obviously, that we need to discuss. So I just want to say that Torah Ohr answers all the questions here. Everything is here. What it doesn't, the Torah Ohr cannot tell us how to understand Ayin Beis. That we need to do because Ayin Beis came later. So I'm here doing two things. We learned the Maimer. I summed up the whole Maimer. If you want to understand Torah Ohr, just read it again and again till you understand it. I can point out to you what says where. Everything is here. It's just brief. Then there's understanding it in context of Ayin Beis, which is my real objective here. So I just want to make sure that when you ask a question, or anyone asks a question, are you asking on the Torah Ohr, or are you asking in the context of Ayin Beis? That's a key difference. That's all I wanted to point out.
You're right. That was not a question. I just want to say that your explanation, Alter Rebbe said it. And you could also see.
Okay,
now,
fine. Good.
After we learned the Alter Rebbe, you could see how exactly it is. Has to be ve'ohavto, then vo'yadvorim ha'ele asher onoichi mitzavcho. Then it's continuing with Torah Ohr. Thank you.
Okay. And again, I refer back to page 1352, a very critical section where he says these words, where he says, it says like this, 1352. I'm sorry, 1351. It says, Hapsili ha-mitzvah, ha-mislabeshes, Hamislabish b'dvarim hagashmim rotzna elyon. So rotzna elyon hamislabish, and Torah Ohr is Ohr atzmi. Those are the key words from Ayin Beis that helps us understand it. So basically, neshama ner Hashem nishma sodom, and the Avid creates is more, I would say, almost more like a keli. Their mitzvah is Ohr, but it's an Ohr l'fi erech hakeli, like he says here, mislabish b'dvarim gashmim, and then Torah Ohr is Ohr atzmi. Those are the words he used. Atzmus ha'Ohr. Yeah. And status imini techapkeni is still a maki. Not the premium.
This is the answer.
Atzmus Erein Sof. That is this, and the Torah is nimshach through the mitzvahs, which is mechaber Eira Torah ima Adam va'elam. Says also mitzvahs connect the Eira Torah with the person and the world. And yeah, good. So that way you have everything working very well together here. Also, Torah is also chakim v'lei b'chachmi yediyah, where that you don't have in mitzvahs, obviously. Okay. I'm saying. Okay. Are there any other questions?
This is the answer. How is the neshama?
I already said that. Yeah, how the neshama does it, because the neshama does it through its bonus.
Nefesh Haba'am is a seichel shel shekel, and this is making it for a seichel amiti.
Okay. Are there? Everybody's fine. No questions.
Did you hear what I told you now?
To me, it's obvious. It's from the mimer. Yeah, I heard.
Okay. In the beginning of this mimer, before the bio, the Alter Rebbe is talking about that the Torah is changing the seichel, because a human seichel is seichel shel shekel. So this is what the Rabbi.
Are you asking me to confirm? It says that in the mimer. Yes, I'm saying it says that in the mimer. Correct.
You said before that it's not answer in the Ayin Beis. How is it transforming? So I think that this is giving.
I said in Torah Ed, he does say how it transforms it.
Okay.
Yeah. The Torah Ed asked that question and answered it. In Ayin Beis, he never gets back to it. So correct. Okay, no questions? Wow, okay, beautiful. Everybody got it. That's good. So, what we're going to do next, then, we're going to see one thing here.
I think the Alter Rebbe is continuing in the next mimer about this topic. But
in a different way. It's not a hemshach to this. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is going to start learning the Mittler Rebbe's mimer. I don't know if I'll do that today, but I'll just give a small intro. So after the Alter Rebbe, these two Maimorim we just learned, the Maimer and the Beer. So the Mittler Rebbe has a long Maimer that's based on all this. And this is also, it's on ayinbeis.com. We scanned all the pages. It's in Maimori Admuram Tzoi Bereshis. I have it right here. Page 461, if I recall correctly. So what I'm going to do tomorrow, let me make sure. I think it starts, let me see. 361, I'm sorry, I said 461, 361. Yeah. So 361 is this mimer. It's a long mimer. But what it does is it takes the Alter Rebbe's mimer and elaborates extensively, and it serves as a very good bridge that with that, we'll be able to understand a whole bunch of things in Ayin Beis, even more than the Torah Ohr taught us. So we did learn from Torah Ohr the answer to the question of the effect on the animal soul, but in the Mittler Rebbe is going to go much deeper into, a much more elaborate, I should say, into how the understanding of Achdus Hashem, Hashem Echad, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, actually impacts the animal soul. So he's going to talk a lot about that, his bonus. And then I think we'll also get a better picture of some of the Mamat Lamayla, Mamay Lamata. But we already take out from Torah Ohr, we can understand how Torah Ohr is a Mamay Lamata experience, and with Ohr Hariyah is going to be relevant to what they're after understanding what it says in these Maimarim, go back to the theme of Riyah, which is, as I said, is a critical piece in the whole picture. And that ultimately brings us back to understand the whole central theme of Ayin Beis. Because at the end of the day, today we have limited vision, but La'asid Lave, we'll be able to see godliness eye to eye. Like right now, it's revealed only through Torah. We'll be able to basically become one with godliness, which is ultimately the goal. Not just that through Torah, we get a picture of what God wants, but we actually are, we ourselves become so permeated, we like walking Torah. Right now, we're not a walking Torah. We're not even a walking mitzvah. We're a neshama that comes into a body, an animal soul, and we work on ourselves to refine ourselves. The goal is to become so refined and so saturated that we become one with the mitzvah, and then ultimately one with Torah itself, where we ourselves, our neshama reaches a point where our neshama experiences godliness pure, without the tzimtzum, and even higher than it would be in Torah, to the point that we can contribute to Torah, like we learned earlier in Ayin Beis. So it's a whole process of how it goes downward, and then how we climb step by step, and ultimately the neshamas will be mashpia into Torah and into the guf and into the neshamas will mashpia in Torah, and ultimately the guf itself will be mashpia in the neshama. That's the ultimate, when the keli itself becomes transformed, einoid Elokim itself, which is going to be the final piece in the whole picture. So that's some of the lay of the land where we'll be headed here.
Rabbi Yitzchok, could you send the little Rebbe's mimer on the page?
It's online, ayinbeis.com. You have all the pages there.
I just posted it. I also just posted it before you even spoke, Rav Shlomo, to the WhatsApp group. So everybody could make it real simple. Everybody can get it right from the WhatsApp group.
Thank you very much.
But then you can see it only on your phone, which is small. On ayinbeis.com, you can see the whole page on your screen.
Well, people can download it if they use their desktop. I don't know.
Anyway,
No, you can print from the phone. By the way, do you think it's good? It's worthwhile to buy the safer itself?
Is
it available?
It's up to you. I don't know if it's available, and it's up to you. You want to have it? Why not? I mean, we put it up online so people can learn it when they're at their leisure.
Yeah, but Ayin Beis wasn't available, so we had to.
Ayin Beis you can buy from Chaos, and other places too.
No, not the whole thing. No, not the whole thing. I mean, they used to have it it was a 3-volume set. Now they're putting out little, 1 or 2 more. I don't know. You'd have to buy about 10 different books if it's all out yet. I don't know.
It's all out. It's a 3-volume set. I own it.
It hasn't been available for
We're not
months.
talking about it. They're not giving out the 3-volume set anymore. They are
it's
now
4 volumes
giving it
then.
out with footnotes. So it's going to be more like 6, 7 volumes.
Meanwhile, they have 4. I have the old one, which is like you said.
Okay. So you know what? We'll stop here.
Rabbi, before you turn off the recording, can you talk about the fundraising campaign you have for the books? Because I didn't see anywhere on meaningfullife.com website any link to donate for the meaningful.
We didn't put the link up. We're still working on the page. It's going to take a few more days.
Okay.
So you could wait. It's fine. We're in the process of already printing and distributing, as I gave an update. As soon as that page is available, I will put it up. Right now, it's not yet.
Okay.
If you dafka want to donate, you could donate, and it will be earmarked for this. But if you want to have the exact that page, that will soon be there. They're working on it. Yeah, this week will be the first distribution. The first 1,000 books are going to be distributed.
I'm sorry. Say again, please.
I wrote it. I wrote last week that this week is going to be the first distribution of the first 1,000 books. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yeah,
Yes.
I accidentally.
Yeah, fine.
I muted myself accidentally.
Yes.
I said I wrote before Shabbos that the first 1,000 books are being distributed this week.
That's amazing. That's
Truly amazing.
Behind enemy lines in Gaza.
It's amazing.
I posted a video of the packages, how it's going to be packaged. You saw?
Yeah, I saw that too.
Yeah.
Yep.
I
Permeating
just posted.
That was the big challenge. I wanted to make sure that distribution is done respectably and, in a good way.
I just posted the 4-volume set of Ayin Base that I got from Kijos, just for in case people want to see what they can buy.
What you have is the new edition. It's not the same page numbers that we usually use,
right?
But it's a new edition with the footnotes. What we have is 3 volumes of the whole thing, with it's the same thing. It's just one has footnotes, so it made more pages. But even on yours, it'll say what is the old pages will be on the side. They have
exactly
markings.
Yep.
Oh, also this guy who was just elected in the Netherlands is very pro-Israel. Geert Wilders, and his wife is Jewish. So maybe you should send one to him too.
To whom?
His name is Geert Wilders, I think.
If you have any, as I always say, if you have a name and an address and a reference, please send it to us, and we'll.
All right. I don't have an address, but I'll figure it out.
Even better, it would be to have the Argentinian president send a greeting to the Norwegian new president and say, "Hey, you got to check out this book. This is going to change your life."
Never, but it's okay. I think the Argentinian guy is going to really make a big impact. Looks like he's really fully involved.
If you could get it to his wife, probably she's going to be.
We're still recording, by the way.
The Jewish wife.
Recording.
Maybe I should stop the recording. Hold on.